So with me is the Minister for Home Affairs, Justice and Home Affairs, and Poole-Wilson. This is an interview that I think is way overdue. I've been trying to get you for some months, since Alan Shea, of course, came on and did a thing about apologies, and you had to back me off a few times. We're finally there with this massive announcement over to you on exactly what is going to be done here in the Isle of Man, especially its historical gay sex crimes, I suppose you might call it. It sounds quite dramatic, but over to you.
Yes, so the effect today, Paul, is that Part 11 of the Sexual Offences and Obscene Publications Act is being switched on effectively. And that part, you're right, it is really important, because what it does is it gives rise to automatic pardons for those historic convictions. It also switches on a disregards process, so that means that if there are people who have those historic convictions who would like to have them removed from their criminal record, there is now a process whereby they can apply to the Department of Home Affairs to say, please can you look at the historic records, and please can I apply to have those historic convictions and cautions removed from my criminal record. So it is important, and I think it is another step along in a series of steps that the island has taken to try and put right those unjust laws and the hurt and the pain, I know, that many people do still feel.
It's a long time since the last Chief Minister actually stood up to make the apology on behalf of government. Again, this is such a lagging period. What's going on? Why so much time?
I think some of it is to do with how legislation works, if I'm honest, Paul. So that Chief Minister's apology, which I agree with you, was so important and significant, and that took place while the Sexual Offences and Obscene Publications Bill was working its way through the House of Keys, and that's why that happened a couple of years ago now. What we're now doing is implementing that bill step by step, but we promised earlier this year that we would make sure that these pardons and the disregards process would come live by no later than the end of June, and that's why it's really important that we switch this process on. And the reason it's taken a little bit of time this year is because of the disregards needing to involve an application process. There's been some work going on behind the scenes to put in place the mechanics of that, to put in place some guidance, and I'd like to take the opportunity to say thank you to a couple of representative groups, which is the Isle of Man Constabulary Inclusion Scrutiny Group and Isle of Pride, because they've actually had a look at the process and the guidance and given some feedback, which personally I think is really, really important. We want this process to work. It's not automatic though.
It's not people just going through the books now and just removing these crimes. You've got to apply, have you?
The pardons are automatic.
Right.
But to have it removed from your criminal record, there has to be an application process. Well, that's because in any individual case, without looking at the historic records and seeing what the nature of any convictions are, you can't determine which convictions might be capable of being removed from the criminal record. So, for example, anything that would still be an offence under modern law, and that would be any non-consensual sex or sex with someone under 16, that's still a criminal matter today, even though we modernised the law in 1992 to remove homosexual consenting sex. Certain things that would still be a criminal matter under the modern law today, those sorts of things can't be disregarded from your criminal record. So you have to have a process of looking at what the different convictions are or cautions, and then removing those that are historic and no longer a crime.
So how far do you go? I mean, at one stage it was 21. And if then it went to 18, and then finally to 16. Are those people covered as well?
Yeah,
because the laws changed?
Yeah, it's anything that would no longer be a crime under our modern
law. By today's laws,
correct,
I understand. So there's how many people you're thinking are going to affect?
Unfortunately, because of the historic nature of this, it is really, really difficult to know. I mean, there is a sense we have that it could be in the region of 30, but I mean, that's just a sense. And until we receive applications and we start to see who's applying and how many individuals and convictions we're talking about, I'm afraid I just can't give an accurate number on that.
Of course, that is the people who are still alive.
Yes.
I mean, people kill themselves.
Yeah.
We have no record of how many exactly can be tied up to that. That obviously brings up the question of compensation. Do you go that far? Will there be any sort of payouts to people who have been affected by this?
Yeah, I think that the issues that we've had are the law, when it was in effect, was the law. Now, we recognise today that these things were absolutely unjust, and that was one of the main reasons, I think, for the Chief Minister's apology in the previous administration to recognise that those laws were unjust. And I think that's also why today we say, and actually if you were convicted under those laws when they existed, those unjust laws, there should be an automatic pardon and a disregard process.
I mean, people who lost their houses, homes, family, whatever, is a route to full compensation?
I think that is really difficult because this is so historic now. It is so difficult. I recognise that the pardons, I hope, give some recognition to people that you know, their convictions we recognise were unjust, and the disregard process, I hope, also gives some comfort to people that they should no longer have these things on their criminal record.
Now, you mentioned the constabulary. We have a chief constable who hasn't done an apology. I understand, still, as last I've checked, he hasn't made an apology and doesn't seem to want one. I've asked him for interviews about this. After the interview I did with Alan Shea and asked you and I asked him, obviously, he didn't want to go on camera do any more about it, he said. But you're saying he's talking to different groups. But where does this really have to be? Where's that line drawn? That so he has to make an apology?
So I am really pleased, actually, Paul, that the Chief Constable has also been engaging.
Engaging is different to an apology.
I think this is a really significant thing that the Chief Constable and the representative groups have been undertaking. I haven't been directly involved, but I do know that he's been talking to representatives of the Isle of Man Inclusion Scrutiny Group and Isle of Pride, really to hear a lot more about people's experiences, how they feel, the hurt and the pain.
Yes, I understand, but the thing is, he was in the force, and if you listen to Alan Shea, he was a bobby on the beat in those days. He's very much part of this process. He's part of the story.
And I think that's why the engagement that he's been having with these groups is so important. And that process is still happening. I'm fully aware that is still happening, and I am looking forward to hearing from those groups and the Chief Constable in due course when they have had when that dialogue process and that engagement has concluded.
Will you expect him to make an apology, though?
I want to hear from the Chief Constable what he has got from that engagement, and that is it is a matter for the Chief Constable.
Right. You can't make him do it, and anything like that.
As Minister, I absolutely should not and cannot interfere.
And he's going to retire soon anyway.
With the Chief Constable, it is a matter for him. But I am looking forward to hearing what he has to say after this process of engagement and reflection.
It's been a rocky road, it's been a long road, and it's been a painful road. Is there anything else you want to say to people who have been affected by this? I mean, is everything now been done that you think can be done?
I do wonder whether you can ever fully get to a point where you can say you've done absolutely everything to make sure that people do feel really included and safe in their society, no matter who they are. So I think we have come a long way. Personally, in my lifetime, I was so upset as a young person with our historic laws. That change in 1992 was so important. The changes that we see coming into effect today, again, very important. Can we do more? Should we be doing more? Absolutely. I have an involvement with the Isle of Pride, and I think that bringing pride to the Isle of Man, and we'll have another festival this year, these things are important, but also I know the charity wants to do more around year-round work, education, awareness, provision of safe spaces. Of course we can always do more, and I'm keen to see us keep progressing.
I appreciate you're not the constabulary, but people who have issues or there's hate crimes, what would you say to people that have been affected or still being affected?
I think it's another good area, and again we've built that into our legislative programme at Home Affairs, because I think again it's recognised that unfortunately in our society there are people who experience hate, and it does damage them, it devastates them. So absolutely that's something in our legislative programme for this administration, and there will be some engagement with those representative groups and wider society to look at how we should formulate some legal protection in that space so that we can try and stop this.
And are you mirroring the UK laws, or are you just...
Well, that's again why we need to have the consultation and engagement, because if you look at the Scottish legislation around hate crime and you look at the approach that's been taken in England and Wales, they're not the same. And I think we are in that privileged position that we can legislate for ourselves, so it becomes very important that when we design our own laws, they work for us. So we will look at different models, but we will also engage locally with people as well.
So still a little bit more work to do?
Oh yes, yeah. I mean, the one thing I would say, Paul, is when it comes to legislation, generally speaking, it is not a quick process, but given it becomes law, and that obviously has an implication for people's lives, I think doing that work thinking about how you should frame that law so it works in practice effectively for us on the island, I think it's good work to do to try and get it right.
Okay, just to finish with, is this a good day for the Isle of Man then? I mean, because this has been, if you Google it, it's always come up, and it probably will always come up as a dark period, but is this now almost closing the book, well, the chapter maybe, if not the book?
Yes, and it is a good day as far as I'm concerned, and I hope that for everyone who's been affected by this dark period, that they feel it is another positive step on the journey to us having a much more forward-focused and positive, inclusive future.